Hi, welcome back everyone. I'll read a few pages from Dr. Maurice Nicoll. And why am I reading this to you? Because I really resonate deeply with Maurice Nicoll. I agree completely with what he's saying. It's very directly practical for the work I'm doing, for the harmonious development of man, for raising the level of consciousness, for cleaning up the chaos of the mind, body, instinct, and attaining some kind of practical route towards higher states of presence. Also, I really love Maurice Nicoll. He really, I feel like he got a serious transmission, knowledge and practice from Jung, as well as Gurdjieff and Uspensky. It's a clear transmission of Gurdjieff and Uspensky living on. Here we go. So from the psychological commentaries on the teachings of Gurdjieff and Uspensky, Volume 3, November 17th, 1945. Work on the emotional center. At the last meeting here, a question was asked about how to work on the emotional center. The great trouble with the emotional center is that we are always identified with it. That is, with emotions that we are under at any particular moment. We have the greatest difficulty in separating ourselves from the emotional state of the moment. We take our emotional state for granted. For example, we feel emotionally jealous, which is a different thing from feeling instinctively jealous, and we are completely identified with this emotion. Or again, we are emotionally depressed, and once more, we take this as our state, as something we do not challenge. As you know, the work teaches that the emotional center is the most difficult center to deal with. You have heard that it is called the mad elephant, and it is also said that we must try to bring up two tame elephants on either side of it, one of which is the intellectual center and the other the moving center. The whole question lies in the difficulty of observing emotional center in a non-identified way. The reason is that we identify with our emotions more than with anything else. And so I repeat, we take our emotional state always for granted, not as something that we have to observe and separate from. Everyone has a typical series of constantly recurring emotional states, which vary from the greatest excitement and enthusiasms to the most depressed and morbid feelings. But because the force of the emotions is so blinding, people remain fixed on the turning wheel of their emotions. In other words, people do not distrust their emotions, but take them as if they were genuine and quite real states. They accept their emotions as right at any particular moment. And because emotions are so difficult to observe, owing to our tendency to identify with them, they do not observe them as something to observe and not go with. The starting point always lies in self-observation, and in this case, observation of the emotional state. Now, can any of you do this yet? Can you observe your emotional state without taking it for granted as being your real state? Have any of you got in your work memory the knowledge of some of your typical recurrent emotional states? Do any of you yet question your particular emotional state? In other words, as I said, do you challenge your emotional state and say to yourself, why am I in this emotional state? What is it due to? and in connection with what has it arisen. The effort of internal attention will then begin to separate you from the emotional state, and you may be able thereby to disarm it, i.e., not go with it, not believe in it, not take it for granted. There are two sources of our emotional states at any moment. One source is some external stimulus, such as a person not behaving rightly to you or saying something rather unpleasant to you. And the other is the typical habitual emotion coming from a pathetic feeling about your past. The overcoming of the past is one great line of personal work on yourself. Most people have such a great register of unhappy moments, which they have nourished so much that often it is very difficult for them to escape from these pathetic states, which of course only give rise to continual negative emotions, which only create useless suffering. This personal work is of a very special type, and everyone must be able to face it after a time. The whole of the past must be cancelled eventually. In other words, you must have nothing against anyone. You must forgive all debts. And as has been often said recently, you can only do this by completely changing your opinion of yourself through self-observation. The other source is how people behave to you externally each day. You become negative with someone for acting in a certain way to you which you think is wrong. And you must all see that these two sources, inner and outer, of negative emotions are very closely connected. On one occasion, when Mr. Ouspensky was talking about this subject and how we identify with every emotional state, he gave us a supreme formula. To non-identify, take nothing serious except the work. I'll say this again. To non-identify, take nothing serious except the conscious work. Now, in regard to being negative and having an unpleasant emotional state towards a particular person, supposing you have got to the point of being able to observe that you are in an unpleasant emotional state, and this of course means that you do not quite identify with it. So let us suppose that you are slightly conscious of being in a negative state towards a particular person. How are you going to deal with it? Here, all the work that you have done personally comes in. Try to formulate what it is that makes you negative as regards this person, and then look into the book of your own self-observation, into your own records of yourself, that is, into your work memory, and try to see whether what you find so difficult to bear in this other person is not something that you also have in yourself. This is very good. Try to see whether what you find so difficult to bear in this other person is not something that you also have in yourself. Realizing that you are just as difficult in yourself as the person that you criticize produces instantly the magical feeling of surrender, of canceling, of freedom. But in order to do this, you must use the intellectual center. In other words, you must think. Here comes in a very good example of what thinking in the work sense means. And I can assure you that whatever you think in the way, it will give you the greatest feeling of freedom that you have ever experienced. Once again, and I can assure you that whatever you think in this way, it will give you the greatest feeling of freedom that you have ever experienced. Again, suppose that you are negative because someone says something unpleasant to you. This is really the same thing as I have been speaking about. It is extremely difficult to meet, and you may not be able to meet it at the moment. Not every event that happens to you, such as someone saying something unpleasant to you, should be capable of being transformed. All this work is about transforming ourselves, both in relationship to our past and in relationship to what is happening to us now. I can only say, have you ever said anything unpleasant to other people? And can you later on bring the memory up of having said something equally unpleasant? Once again, I can assure you that if you can do this, you will find that this little event of someone saying something unpleasant to you will become completely cancelled, completely neutral. Although, as I said, you may not be able to do it all this just at the moment when someone is unpleasant to you. So much of our personal work is done after the event. It is quite useless to forgive. You have to cancel. And this is always done by finding the same thing in yourself. And you will always find it if you are sincere. No one can behave to you otherwise than you behave to other people, because your being attracts your life. Do you understand that this must be so if it is possible to believe in psychotransformism? The trouble with us is that we will take ourselves for granted as being nice and sweet people. And you must remember here that you may not have said something unpleasant externally yourself, but you have thought something and consented to it. In the work, you must understand that what you think psychologically in yourself, in your own privacy, counts as much as what you say externally. I'm speaking of those thoughts to which you have consented, those checks to which you have signed your name. They count just as much as what is said openly. The Gospels often speak of this, but the case is quite different with a person in the work into whose mind come many unpleasant thoughts about other people, but who does not consent to these thoughts. He sees quite easily how he could combine chemically with them, but he will not allow these combinations really to take place. And after a time, his temptation is over. This is real temptation, because all real temptation is about the work. When you do not go with unpleasant thoughts and feelings about other people, but are quite aware of them, you are really working on yourself. This is personal work. If you are so foolish as to say, "Why do I have these thoughts and feelings about other people?" you are quite wrong. You are only praying to end strife in yourself. But all strife gives the possibility of development, and I suppose it is almost right to say that all development consists in non-identifying with one is taught. It is almost right to say that all development consists in not identifying with one is taught by the work, not to identify with. If you consent to negative, bitter, or suspicious thoughts, do you not see that you have been tempted successfully, and that the small vessel of the work that you are trying to make, the small retort, has already got a leak in it, which may take you weeks to repair? And often it is a very small thing, apparently trivial, that completely exhausts your force, because it makes a leak in you. Thoughts of self-pity, of course, make holes in you. You become, instead of a retort, a calendar full of holes, in which everything poured into you, everything you have done for yourself, leaks out. Take envy. Envy seems a slight thing, but it makes a very big hole. Take malice. Take the sting in your tongue, or in your letter, in your email, in your text. That makes a very big hole. Or take hatred arising from being offended. All these states are states of identifying. All psychology, all real psychological teaching is about how to make a man grow, and it has a very definite object. The idea being that if a man retains his force in a certain way, he can create in himself a new man, a different person. The metaphors used to convey this teaching have varied in different ages. In the alchemical teaching, which dealt apparently with turning lead into gold, but which really dealt with changing man himself into a new being, there's always this idea of retort, something that cannot be penetrated by wrong influences, something that brings together all the essential parts of the man through a certain friction, transforming them into a new body. We seek to reach a higher level of being. What is one sign of a higher level of being? Let me turn the question in this way. Do you think a person who is full of self-pity, of envies, jealousies, complaints, malices, depressions, and negative states of all kinds can enter the kingdom of heaven? What is the kingdom of heaven? Why, nothing but what the practice of real psychology leads to, which in this work is called higher being. So we have something definite to do. It is not theory, not an invention. It is permanent teaching. Everything in this work teaches us about something quite real and definite. It is a way leading to something definite and possible for those who can hear. It is about man and his permanent meaning, not his local meaning. And there is therefore something that will necessarily respond to man if he makes the right requests and efforts. For man has meaning and the universe has meaning. Now, let us return to the original question of how to deal with the emotional center. This is a difficult thing and no one can expect to deal with it for many, many years. But people who wish to do this work must begin to deal on their own scale with their unpleasant emotions. Because the work teaches that practically all the emotions that we know are unpleasant. For instance, triumphing over a rival is a very unpleasant emotion, although at our level we take it as a pleasant emotion. And even the pleasant emotions that we ordinarily experience turn into the most unpleasant emotions in a flash, once our pride or vanity is touched. The reason is because all our emotions are based on self-love, which is touching them, and if there is plenty of flattery, we feel very fine. But if there is not flattery, we feel very depressed. For this reason, it is a very good thing to distrust one's emotions, whether pleasant or unpleasant. And especially one should distrust enthusiasms. Now, the work teaches that they are emotions that do not change. It calls them positive emotions. It does not call our ordinary emotions positive. It merely calls them pleasant or unpleasant. The work teaches that we do not have real emotions yet. I think from my own experience that occasionally we do have real emotions for a very short time, and they are always completely free from all self-love. But I also think that they are very rare and easily invented. Now the work says that we cannot create positive emotions for ourselves. It says that positive emotions do come to us sometimes if we have worked genuinely, and they come as rewards. It also says that a characteristic of a positive emotion, which comes from higher emotion center, is such that it never turns into an opposite. Our ordinary so-called love turns very easily into hate. A positive emotion has no opposite because it belongs to the third force, which is between the opposites. As you all know, the purification of the emotion center is one of our great objects. We can reach it only through the purification of the intellectual center, through new ideas, both about ourselves and about other people, and about the meaning of all life on earth. When the mind begins to see the new truth, then the emotion center can begin to give up these false emotions. The ultimate object is to awaken the emotion center so that it can receive positive emotions. And while this is very far from us at present, we all know surely how much work we have to do on our present emotion center and our present emotional states that result from it. We have, for example, to give up having our own way all the time. Do not think that this can be done in a moment. It takes such a long time for us to realize what it means, this having our own way in everything. But when we begin to dissolve our ordinary mechanical feeling of ourselves, and I would say here, how many of you are sure that you are perfectly all right in yourselves? Then we shall begin to break up the very sources of this self-love and these self-emotions that at present govern everyone. It is only the things that you must despise in yourself that are probably some good. Christ was not born in a manger without significance as to what can grow in man. I'll read the last sentence again. It is only the things that you most despise in yourself that are probably some good. Christ was not born in a manger without significance as to what can grow in man. Yeah, so let this not remain at the level of intellectual, philosophical study, and the aim is to, as we are being more aware, more present, observing ourselves, to start to observe our unpleasant, reactive, self-absorbed emotion states. And without judging them, without rejecting them, just notice them, see through them, and through this self-observation and for understanding that this is not me. This is not me. I am that which is aware of these states. And these states are these are conditioned emotional states from our ancestors, from society, from wrong attitudes. They are false personality emotional states, all narcissistic, but not narcissistic that I'm so amazing, but it's all about me. The regular emotional states, the lower emotional center states, are all about me, based on faulty attitudes. People should be in a certain way, reality should be in a certain way, the weather should be in a certain way, I should be treated in a certain way. Underneath there is this false personality, sense of me being special, either in an amazing way or in a victim-y or self-tortured, self-pity, self-deprecating way. So the work is to start observing this, and for just observing, bring presence to these states, we extract somehow the feeling of identity from this, and gradually, ever gradually, if we are really interested and serious about this work, they will gradually dissolve also for understanding, for seeing that they bring nothing good. Actually, it leaks our God-given energy. All right. Make this practical.